This is HBR News number 503. Biden diagnosed with cancer, FBI investigates fertility clinic bombing, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all of the absurdity so that you're not consumed by it. My name is Brian, and I am the host of HBR News, and I'm joined by, as always, my lovely co-hosts, Dr. Random Cam and Hannah Wallen. On today's episode of HBR News, we're going to be discussing the recent news of former President Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis. An explosion at a California fertility clinic reveals what could be the dark side of climate alarmism. Darth Vader is in Fortnite, and it's really interesting, and more, so stick around. It's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So on this patron show, this will hopefully be the last, but we're going to basically finish this extremely loquacious article about the womanosphere. The anti-feminist media that's telling women to be thin, fertile, and Republican, which of course is evil for some reason. So if you want to join us for the remainder of that conversation, you have to become a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com/subscribe. $5 a month will get you into the Discord server, which is, at this point, less than the cost of a cup of coffee at like a known chain. And if you give it higher levels, you can actually participate in the conversations yourself. Maybe you have some pearls of wisdom you would like to spit out at us. And we welcome you guys to join on the patron shows. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we have been yeeted from the internet because we have essentially, misogyny too close to the sun, then look for our content that's archived over at honeybadgerradio.com or at badgerfeed.com. All right, so with all that out of the way, let us get into today's stories. All right, so first thing is first. Former U.S. President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer on May 16th, 2025, after experiencing urinary symptoms that led to the discovery of a nodule on his prostate. The cancer, characterized by a Gleason score of 9, grade group 5, has metastasized to his bones, classifying it as stage 4, the most advanced stage, with a 5-year survival rate of approximately 28%, according to Johns Hopkins Medicine. While the cancer is hormone sensitive, allowing the effective management through testosterone blocking therapies and potentially other treatments like chemotherapy, it is no longer considered curable, but can be controlled for years in some cases. Biden and his family are currently reviewing treatment options with his physicians, and despite the serious prognosis, medical experts note that advancements in treatment offer some hope for managing the disease and maintaining quality of life. The announcement of Biden's diagnosis on May 18, 2025, sparked widespread speculation about how long he may have had the cancer and who knew about it beforehand. Some medical experts, such as Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, suggested the cancer likely developed over years, raising questions about why it wasn't detected earlier, or reported on earlier, especially given Biden's access to comprehensive medical care during his presidency. His February 2024 physical exam did not include prostate cancer screening, as such tests are not typically recommended for men over 70 due to potential harms outweighing the benefits. Critics, including President Donald Trump and other Republicans, have speculated without evidence that Biden's team may have concealed the diagnosis during his time in office, particularly amid prior concerns about his health and mental acuity. However, there is no definitive evidence to support claims of a cover-up, and some Democrats have pushed back, urging empathy for the 82-year-old former president.
First of all, if we are to speculate on anything, it should be to what degree we're even being told the truth. The likes of MSNBC, where the aforementioned Dr. Emanuel was interviewed, MSNBC has done nothing but lie through their teeth about Biden for the last 5 years at least, telling us he's sharp and perfectly on form.
This is the best Biden ever.
Yeah, he speaks 12 languages and shoot lasers out of his eyes. Of course he's fit to be president. He has strength of the bear and ears of the wolf and speed of the boomer and so on. So why are they now turning around and telling us that Biden is indeed a demented, cancerous vegetable and has been for some time? They could have carried on keeping it a secret right up until he dies, which could be a couple of years from now. And they could easily claim that it was diagnosed after he was president. They, they could have revealed the information a year ago, presuming he had cancer a year ago. If they did that, that would have given them a legitimate reason to run Kamala Harris instead and to get a few sympathy points on top of it. Right now is among the worst times to reveal the information from their perspective, because even the amnesiac masses of normies can still remember the absolute yarn that was spun about what perfect health Joe Biden was in. So they must have a good reason to be telling us now. Whenever, whenever the mainstream media tells us something, we must ask ourselves 4 crucial questions. Why are these lying liars lying to us? What are they lying about? What aren't they telling us about this story? And what stories aren't they telling us about at all? And it's that 4th question that's of interest to me. I think we're being distracted, folks. I think there's some really dark shit happening, like stage left. So they're dangling the shiny things over at stage right and hoping we won't notice. Remember that story about the drones back in late November, early December, whenever it was? That was a nothing burger, but it was all over the news because they were trying to distract us from the story about the pardoning of Hunter Biden. It happens all the time. So, yeah, leave a comment below, folks. What do you think they're trying to distract us from? Does Joe Biden even have cancer? Is that even Joe Biden anyway? Or is it some guy in a frankly ill-fitting rubber mask? As you can see, I am not complying with this plea to show empathy for Joe Biden. I will never do that. I will never show him any reverence or respect, no matter how cancerous he becomes. Cancer has many symptoms, but they don't include magically turning an utter bastard into a noble hero. It can slowly dissolve your organs, but it doesn't dissolve your legacy as a scumbag and a shyster and a habitual liar and an opportunistic thief and all-round nasty piece of work. But at the very least, I shouldn't be glad, right? I shouldn't be reveling in his death. Well, yeah, maybe not. But it does depend, doesn't it? It depends on the person. In some states, they put serial child abusers to death, especially historically, and there's a reason this has often attracted live audiences. Sometimes it's justified, and justice is as good a reason as any to be revelatory, to be glad. People all over the world cheered when Saddam Hussein was executed, and with good reason. He was the head of a sadistic, megalomaniac crime family. He deserved to die, and he deserved to die by mandate at the hands of the people he tormented. If Anthony Fauci ends up dying of natural causes, that will be a tragedy because he deserves to die by lethal injection, mandated at the hands of the people he tormented. Anything short of such cosmic justice would itself be an injustice. So, no, I suppose I'm not going to jump for joy or smugly grin at the prospect of Joe Biden dying, but I'm sure as hell not going to feign empathy. He too is the head of a megalomaniac crime family. And what's more, he's just as instrumental as Anthony Fauci was in that whole international scandal that we're not allowed to talk about. So when he does die, I won't be glad. I won't be smug. If anything, I will be disappointed that it was God who took him out in the end. It wasn't God he tormented. It was the American people. this, of course, is all on the assumption that he really does have cancer, or that he really is Joe Biden, or if there ever really was a Joe Biden, maybe all there ever was an empty shell sent to Earth by Satan. In which case, I suppose it's fitting that God is the one to take him out. All right, fair enough. And on that note, I will leave everyone else to take the high road if you absolutely must.
Yeah, there's in terms of discussing this in regard to Joe Biden. Obviously, there are some things that need to be talked about that have fuck all to do with Biden himself, right? That one bit about in the healthcare of elderly men, they don't test for prostate cancer because the test itself can be too harmful. It's because it's to my understanding they're still using the finger test up the butthole where you feel to see if the prostate is enlarged, and that's like one of the first signs and stuff. Which, if that's the case, yeah, you really, when somebody becomes elderly, every bit of tissue in their body becomes more fragile. You can actually create skin tears by grabbing somebody's arm too roughly. And a lot of times, bigger people, whether it's because they're big and tall or whether it's because they're obese, you use a sling to lift them instead of people to lift them because of the potential for skin tears and infections and stuff. But why is it, if we're still doing that, if we're still using that test and we don't have an alternate method, why is that? Because I suspect that if that was a way of dealing with women, there would be other things that they would come up with that would be safer, that they could use for older women, right? Now I'm saying this as someone who has the upcoming boob and a vice grip test.
Ouch.
Impending. Yeah, they're not gentle when they do that test either, but it's not damaging, and I don't think they ever stop doing that so far as I know. But if they do, it's because they can switch to and I know this because of health conditions I have. They can switch to ultrasound, like they would use if they were looking to see if your baby is healthy, and whether you're having a boy or a girl. They can also see if you have lumps they can't see through as well as the rest of your tissue, and um, tumors look different sometimes, most of the time, because they're a denser tissue or a different density of tissue than the surrounding tissue. They look different in ultrasound than they do than the other tissues do around them. And so, if it's true that the reason that they're not testing men in old age for this, when in old age is when it's most likely to happen, because they don't have an alternate way of testing to the finger up the bum test. It's because they're not considering men important enough to switch to a slightly more expensive and involved test, mechanical test, where you look at it using using ultrasound instead of a procedure that can tear tissue as someone gets older. That I don't understand. Do we just not value men at all? Do we not care if everybody's grandpa, dies of cancer? Like, even if people don't care whether Joe Biden dies of cancer or not, right? Everybody's grandpa is going to get old too, at least if he survives long enough to get old. And I mean, mine on one side of my family, mine didn't, but on the other side, my grandpa lived to be 95 years old, and he had testicular cancer, and it didn't actually even manifest until he was 90, and they found it by ultrasound. So I just have to wonder, why why they didn't look for that with ultrasound, why they didn't look for prostate cancer, which is even more dangerous, by ultrasound with Joe Biden. And like, why weren't they checking, especially with someone who is supposed to have some of the most comprehensive, best health care in the entire country? Why was the man who was president of the United States at the time not important enough to use something like ultrasound to check and see if he had any signs of prostate cancer? If men are so uncared for in this country that even the president of the United States is that neglected, when that easy of a method can be used to find out the answer, we're in deep shit.
Yep.
We obviously need to be taking way better care of our men. Who the patient was notwithstanding, the fact whether we like the patient or not notwithstanding, no man should be neglected because the insurance companies or the arbiter of his health care doesn't want to pay for an ultrasound like once every year or once every so many years. That's just bullshit. Sorry, guys, but I think the upshot of this, obviously, having cancer is not a get out of accountability free card, right? That when they do that, they let people off the hook who have done terrible things. I saw that happen with a neighbor that was a drug dealer, and the reason they made it a get out of accountability free card was because he was on an experimental cancer treatment that he received for free, and because of laws that govern experimenting on prisoners, even though he was a known dealer of illegal prescription drugs who engaged in violence within the neighborhood, whose customers were stealing from all of the surrounding neighbors, and this was somebody who moved into the neighborhood where like everybody he had as neighbors that he moved into that house in the midst of were families that had been there for decades. Some of them had been there for a couple of generations. And this guy moves into the neighborhood and starts bringing in people who are abusing opiates and stuff, opiate painkillers and stuff like that. And then he also sold some other stuff that was like we had meth heads in the neighborhood. It was really a problem. But in any case, they wouldn't arrest him. They wouldn't arrest him because if he went to jail, then the state would have to pay millions of dollars for this experimental care that and they couldn't tell him he couldn't have it because that would be denying him medical care. So the solution was to leave him in our neighborhood full of children and elderly people with his customers coming in and out of the neighborhood, engaging on all types of crime. And there were people who suffered injury. There were people who lost important medical equipment to theft. There was, we had a lot of theft that we had to deal with on our property. I couldn't sleep in my room. I was sleeping in the front room, really back room of the house where the back door was, so that I could hear if somebody tried to come into the house, because there were times when people tried to break into the house. And so I slept in that room with a shillelagh, I guess you could say, not to hit anybody with, but it's kind of easy to scare the crap out of somebody if their perceptions are off, and you wake up looking like that chick from The Ring and screaming and rushing at them. So and it did work once with somebody in the backyard messing with the door. But and they thought our house was haunted too. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, all of the consequences of not arresting this guy because, oh, he's got cancer. And of course, we were guilt tripped over this too, right? Oh, how can you hate this man? He has cancer. Well, yeah, he has cancer, but we just had to buy 4 new tires because his customers put nails in them, right? Yeah, he has cancer, but we just had our house broken into by his customers because they're mad at us for calling the cops. And at one point, this man actually called the cops and accused me of witchcraft. Backfired on him. They finally did have to take him in. He had been arrested previously and he was on probation and he was high as fuck when they went and did a welfare check on him because of that call. But you can't just ignore this. And when he did go to jail, he died from withdrawal from some opiate drug he was addicted to because they didn't have the drug to give to him in our small community. And, they didn't have methadone for him either. And he went into some sort of a seizure and died a pretty awful death. And if he had been handled the way any other drug dealer was handled, maybe he would have had a chance at rehab. Maybe he would have had a chance at surviving his cancer. But definitely, there are some family heirlooms that my family would still have. There are some people who wouldn't have been injured in the neighborhood. I would have been able to sleep, and so on. So this idea, that's a minor crime, right? You look at Joe Biden and the things that he did and the things that he has been investigated for. And, I know that he has all these pardons out there, but the connections that he had and the crimes that he has covered up, choosing not to prosecute him because he has cancer. Like, what happened in my neighborhood is tiny compared to this. How many people might get away with heinous crimes against the people of the United States or against individuals that they victimized because Joe Biden doesn't get prosecuted if we decide, oh, this poor old man, he's got cancer, we're not going to do anything about the crimes he committed. Yeah, I'm sorry for him. I'm sorry for anybody that has cancer. I can't help that. But it doesn't change what he did. And it doesn't change what has to be done in response to what he did. There is no excuse, and there is no get out of accountability free card. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame he might not remember any of the things he's done over his 50-year career as a quote unquote public servant. But yeah, it's most people from this generation can only remember the shit he did in the last 5 years, or indeed the shit he was complicit in during Obama's reign. But no, this guy is the term male feminist. Well, this guy is the end of level boss of male feminism. He's been doing this for his whole career, and he's been opportunistically just dunking on whoever he can dunk on. For everyone who voted for him because they thought he was in favor of blacks, just look back on the shit he said in his past. And for any one of these given client groups of the woke agenda, there's no one he hasn't shat on in his career. He has always shat on the lowest common denominator of whoever he can shit on in order to build his career. He's the worst possible kind of human ever in history. Again, I'm not glad he's dead. I mean, he is dead. He died ages ago. I'm just going to say he fucking died ages ago. That's a guy in a rubber mask. And either way, I'm not glad and I'm not sad. I'm indifferent about all of this.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Fuck cancer, but also fuck Joe Biden.
Right. But I can think of someone that I think might be worse than Joe Biden. Maybe.
Yeah.
And I think that's Jill Biden because she was closest to him throughout all of this. We knew about his mental decline, we knew about his cognitive decline, and the whole time Jill Biden was the person that was putting him in front of crowds, putting microphones in his face. She likely knew and basically saw this as an opportunity to exploit him, like regardless of the condition he's in. So my thinking is that and look, I'm not defending Joe Biden. I see this story as an opportunity to talk about two things. Number one, prostate cancer. Guys, if you when you turn 50, get checked. It's worth it. Also, prostate cancer, notice that it gets a very small percentage of the funding that breast cancer does, and yet prostate cancer affects uh men I believe in similar numbers or the same numbers or even more numbers than breast cancer does women, but we don't have massive drives, we don't have a ribbon, we don't have the funding that breast cancer gets for research. So that was that. And also, like I said, I think Jill Biden, Joe Biden's wife, likely knew about this and apparently didn't get anything done, didn't want it to get into the papers, I suppose, didn't want to, get the bad press for her party. And so she basically stood by while he deteriorated. And now he's got stage 4 prostate cancer, which is very low survivability rate. He may live for a little bit, but just like Hannah said, we have the technology, but they didn't want to use it for whatever reason. So that's it. I mean, I don't have to go ahead.
I'm pretty sure Jill was a puppet of whoever was pulling her strings, just like Joe was. And I don't know who that was, but it was probably Obama. I'm sure someone else was pulling Obama's strings. I will never know who that was. And I'm not, excusing any of the puppet masters below the puppet masters above them any more than I'm excusing Joe Biden. This is puppets pulling the strings of puppets all the way up.
Yeah, sure.
But with regard to the whole the breast cancer versus prostate cancer thing, we have a system in place. We have had a system in place for decades that would have been perfect for teaching young people everything they needed to know to check for and catch early, because that's you already can learn, cancer is mostly determined by whether you have a genetic predisposition, and then the rest of it's determined by whether you do a bunch of stuff that you don't have to do, and whether you don't do a bunch of stuff that you should do, like eating good healthy food and stuff, right? That's it. And so the rest of death prevention with regard to cancer is figuring out early that you have it and getting it treated before it gets bad. You could teach the same people that you're teaching, this is what an ovary looks like. Here's the symptoms when it's unwell. And these are the ones that could indicate cancer. If this happens, go to the doctor. Tell your parents, or when you're an adult, go to the doctor. Same thing with breast tissue, same thing with uterine tissue, same thing with prostate, same thing with testicles, same thing with any part of the body that you're teaching about. When they go and teach about the heart, this is what causes heart attacks. This is what you should be watching out for. But instead, they're actually busy teaching them, well, you might not be the sex that you were born as, and you should be kind of confused about it. And if you're a boy, you should be upset about it because you're the bad sex. And by the way, there are, a gazillion genders, and you have to pick one. And you can't just pick the one you were born with because that's cheating. Like that. What the fuck? We have this whole curriculum about shit that is not true and not relevant to most people's lives, that is being inflicted on young people when they're in school, instead of teaching them, hey, this is how your organs work. This is what happens when they get sick. This is what it feels like if you start to get cancer in a particular organ. If you have this set of symptoms, go to the doctor. These are the things you can eat to support your organ health. And these are the things that you shouldn't do: smoking and alcohol abuse and drug abuse and all the things that can cause mutations in your genes when your cells are reproducing. That maybe those are a bad idea if you don't want to develop cancer, especially if a lot of people in your family have had it. Like really common sense stuff. What the hell, education system, and what the hell, authorities? We've had this in place. Sex education in particular has been in place since Gen X, who are now old enough to be grandparents, were little kids having to hear about penises and vaginas at 10 years old in 4th grade when we weren't ready for it. Like, why can't this stuff be taught to children? If you're going to teach them about all that other stuff, why can't you teach them how to stay healthy and safe? Wouldn't that make sense? But apparently they're not doing it because we need all this money and all this activism to get women to remember to play with your boobs so you don't get cancer. And we have to tell adult men, play with your balls so you don't get cancer. Right? We have to tell old men, well, we can't test you because it's not important enough to do an ultrasound. And even though you might die if we don't find out soon enough. Like, well, it's just bullshit.
Yeah. All right, I got a super chow, and we're going to move on to the next story. Meredith G gives us $5. Thank you, Meredith, and says, HBR News number 503. I really don't like Joe Biden, never did, but what most people miss is that underlying this story is one of elder abuse perpetrated on Joe, likely by his wife. Word is his mental decline was known back in 2017, that it was evidence a hidden when he made his announcement that he was running back in 2020. That they did was load him up with drugs when they needed him out. Yeah, that's right. But hid him in the rest of the time. And it brings up concerns given the side effects of the most common cancer medication was to be tired and clumsy. I don't point this out to make use think well of Biden, but to point out that everyone around him is just as bad as he is. Karma is a bitch. Yeah, he was just another thing that they used, essentially. Yeah, they had him hopped up on drugs, and he went along with it. I mean, I'm sure that he wanted to win as bad as they did, and it was a choice. So,
and like I said, retribution is occasionally justice, and if anyone should be abused as an elder, it should be someone who spent their entire life abusing people.
Yeah. All right. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next story. So, all right. On May 17, 2025, a car bomb exploded outside the American Reproductive Center's fertility clinic in Palm Springs, California, killing the suspected bomber, 25-year-old Guy Edward Bartkus, and injuring 4 others. The FBI has classified the incident as an intentional act of terrorism, confirming the clinic, which provides in vitro fertilization and other reproductive services, and it was deliberately targeted. Bartkus, who died in the blast, left behind writings and recordings expressing anti-natalist and pro-mortalist views, arguing that bringing people into the world without their consent is extremely wrong. This is what his words, okay? Authorities believe he was motivated by a nihilistic ideology opposing population growth, with some reports suggesting he attempted to live stream the attack and left a manifesto detailing his beliefs. The explosion caused significant damage to the clinic and nearby buildings, but no staff or patients were harmed, as the clinic had no patients present at the time. Investigations revealed Bartkus, a resident of 29 Palms, California, had a history of depression and personal relationship issues, according to law enforcement officials. His father, Richard Bartkus, described him as having a good heart, but believed he was brainwashed into adopting extremist views. The attack has reignited debates about the safety of reproductive health facilities, with advocacy groups like Resolve condemning the violence and highlighting the need for protection for patients and providers. While some, including U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, emphasize the Trump administration's support for fertility treatments, others have speculated about political motivations with no evidence linking the attack to specific political groups, such as MAGA Republicans. The incident has raised concerns about the growing threat of anti-natalist extremism, though experts note this ideology remains obscure and challenging to combat due to its diffuse nature.
Deep show tonight, folks. The theme so far is life and death, and to what degree these things are good and bad. This guy, it seems, was very much under the impression that life is bad, because nobody consents to it. But nobody consents to being born, but nobody consents to not being born either. If I could ask you, do you want to be born? You would not be able to answer that question unless you were alive. So it's kind of moot. It's like pondering why we exist, why the universe exists. Well, if it didn't exist, would you be here asking why doesn't the universe exist? This sucks. It's so boring. Yeah, you probably would. You'd find a way. I know it's tempting to want to go back in time and shake this guy by the collar and go, you don't understand. Life is good. It's the only thing that's good. But I need you to understand, folks, you wouldn't be the first person to try and espouse this worldview to this young man. His response would almost certainly be, yes, I hear where you're coming from. I've heard it all before. Even the Gnostic, nihilistic leftists who proffered me their backward excuse for an education, they would certainly tell me that I'm bad for being male and I'm bad for being straight and whatnot. But even they would always default back to, but life is good and death is bad. I'm just taking a step further out of the box. Maybe life isn't good. I do not concur, by the way. I'm just telling you, if you want to get through to these people, you need to meet them where they are. To be honest, I think I have been, not exactly where this guy was, but at least at its perimeter. At quite an early age, like before puberty, I came up with the idea that because your happiest moments are the moments in which you have nothing to be angry about or afraid or sad about, in other words, when you don't have a care in the world, happiness itself is therefore the default state, which exists prior to or after life itself. I was quite the philosopher when I was a child. This may or may not surprise you. And so I concluded at the time that death is the complete absence of having a care in the world, and that it necessarily manifests as total unbridled happiness, infinitely and omnipresently. When I presented this theory to my friends and family, you can imagine their reaction. It was one of worry, to say the least. There's a very negative way of looking at the world, Mike. And I was like, wait, what? I think life is followed by infinite happiness. And you think that's negative? It's not negative, bro. If anything, it's radically optimistic. It's kind of a bit like this hypothesis, this very popular hypothesis that we call heaven. You see what I mean? Trying to talk this guy out of his ideology is as difficult as talking anyone out of their idea of heaven. It's not as simple as shaking them by the collar and yelling, you don't understand. This life is all there is. This life is our only source of happiness. Because you don't know. Nobody knows that. Now, you might think a solid, pragmatic argument against this worldview is, then why haven't you killed yourself? Eh? If you're so convinced that death is everlasting bliss, why haven't you blown yourself up at an IV clinic? And you can see why that's not the best line of reasoning. Not if you genuinely don't want them to take you up on your offer, because they might just do it. What I would say to this young man, if I could, to perhaps quell his insistence that life is bad and death is good, is the same thing I would say to those who would counter-propose that life is good and death is bad. I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, that in fact, it is all good. Life is good and death is good. Light is good and darkness is good. And the two cannot exist without each other. If there is anything to appreciate about life, it is because death exists. And if there is anything to appreciate about death, it is because life exists. And the only thing we can say for sure about all of us is that we all get to experience both. Even if death can be described as the total absence of experience, we all get to not experience it. So we should make the most of both life and death, because they are both inevitable. In case you were wondering what that yin-yang symbol is all about, it's that. It's exactly that. Light is not the answer. Darkness is not the answer. The answer, if anything, is to live in symmetrical synergy with both, and to die in symmetrical synergy with both. You are alive, ladies and gentlemen, and that is beautiful. It is nothing to fear or run away from. When it happens, it happens. And one day you will be dead, and that is beautiful. It is nothing to fear or run away from. When it happens, it happens. It's a bloody good thing I took so many drugs in my 20s, and I was eventually able to see the light within the darkness, and vice versa. If I didn't, I'd probably be dead by now. But, it's all good.
There you go. Now, what I have to say about this is going to go off on an entirely different tangent. So put on your tinfoil hats and let's go. In every political faction and every political issue, there's the main discussion of whether something is right or wrong, good or bad, how it should be approached by our society, how it should be approached by individuals, what's the moral and ethical questions involved, what's the healthy questions involved for individuals, and so on. Whether that is a healthcare issue, whether it is a military issue, whether it is a lifestyle choices issue, doesn't matter. Those questions exist in all of it, right? And then you have the pro and con arguments on both sides of those questions. And you have some people who really don't give a flying fuck about the issue and don't want to talk about it. And then it ranges from that all the way to people who are obsessive about the issue, and it's the only thing they talk about, and it's the only thing that they think about, and every minute of every day, it's an emergency for them. The fact that this issue exists, and the fact that there are people who disagree with them about this, and the fact that the issue surrounds continues to happen or exist or do or be or be kept in people's minds as their opinion, and so on, right? And at that end, there are always people who are vulnerable to influences that could use an act of extreme violence for their own purposes, regardless of whether it serves any purpose in the debate around the issue or not. And they'll exploit an act of extreme violence against the people they oppose, whether they are directly related to that issue or not, and whether they have anything to do with the violent individual's reason for violence or not. And some of those people are involved in government. Some of those people are involved in other extreme groups. Some of those people are involved in world government. There are conspiracies, and then there are just incidental nutbags that'll talk about shit on Twitter or Facebook or whatever that'll try to exploit it and so on. And this happens whether it is a school shooting, a war crime, a bizarre lifestyle choice that makes the news, like some kind of a cult, an abortion clinic bombing, or a bombing like this at a fertility clinic. A teacher that turns out to have molested multiple children. Anything terrible that has an extreme end of behavior and can be attributed to an extreme take on a particular mentality, you will find people willing to exploit it. And you should watch for that, because I'm not saying that this individual may have been pushed into that in this instance by people desiring to exploit the violence for a particular political argument. But we have seen that happen so many times that you should never take it for granted in any circumstance where such a violent thing has happened that wasn't part of the cause. That nobody pushed this person to do this for the purpose of exploiting it. And then anybody that's making any generalizations about it, well, obviously, he had a point because blah blah blah, and all IVF is characterization inserted here, right? Or obviously everybody that opposes IVF is insert characterization here. No, those generalizations aren't justified by objection to the violence. The violence can still be abhorrent and wrong and shocking and terrible and something that we want to prevent. And people can be right or wrong about their talking points on either side of the issue, completely independent of whether or not this guy was right or wrong to engage in violence. And I also want to point out, like, if you have an issue that is that important to you, that major to you, and you're that caught up in it and everything, and you're in a situation where somebody's been talking to you about, it's hopeless and there's nothing we can do unless we do something extreme, and everything they say goes along those lines, even if they're not as blatant and blunt about it quite as that. And you've been thinking about doing something horribly violent to make your point, or for whatever other reason, in regard to your issue. I want you to notice something about this. All right, this happened, and a lot of attention was drawn to the issue, and people are exploiting this man's violence and the harm that he did and his death for all kinds of political narratives. But is anybody actually affected by it, besides the fact that some people got hurt and some people died? Has the issue that was very important to him, has the way our society treats it been changed at all? None of the abortion clinic bombings, none of the doctor murders that happened stopped abortion. What actually has mitigated the rate of abortions in the United States was going through the political process, taking control of the seats of power, and influencing the public to start objecting to overuse of the procedure, right? And if you have objections to IVF, that is the same process that will work. Is taking control of the seats of power and inserting some common sense, right? Recognizing that you can't end a nationwide, worldwide, in fact, practice by bombing a clinic, but you can influence people's opinions on how frequently should this be done, what conditions should be in place before we allow it, what conditions should cause us to disallow it, and so on. What control should the community have over an individual's access to this, and what stipulations should we make on those controls in order to prevent them from being authoritarian overreach? Those questions can be answered without violence, and they should be. And so if somebody is in a position where they're being encouraged to treat those questions as something that can be addressed by a major act of violence that's only going to have a small impact on the issue, you should look at the people around you who are pushing you down that road and decide that maybe you're hanging out with the wrong crowd and find a different group to talk about this stuff with. And that's my take on it. It's tragic that this kind of thing happens, and it's tragic that people get convinced or convince themselves that this is the way to handle a political issue, because it never works, and it always hurts people who are not involved and who are innocent of any wrongdoing, and that's a tragedy.
All right. Well, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. I heard he may have gotten radicalized on Reddit. So, I mean, that shouldn't shock anyone. But if you're going to go into Reddit, put on a helmet. And I also reached out to BX, who I've had on the show before. She's been doing a lot of work into groups like 764, which are like these, they're basically a satanic cult that tries to get people to commit suicide or commit acts of mass murder. And they do it by using social media, mostly Reddit, to do that. So, and like forums and stuff. But I don't know. We don't know much else except the guy adopted a nihilistic ideology and decided that the world should have fewer people. And he hated the idea of these fertility clinics, or probably against fertility in general, and this was his way of trying to solve the problem. And it's just kind of tragic, but at the end of the day, we are up against ultimately an antinatalist ideology in feminism, and this is sort of like a byproduct of that. So, but anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next story. Oh, how do you guys feel about Brazilian food? Have you ever had, anybody here had Brazilian before? Probably not like this. So on May 16, 2025, a woman from Acrolândia, Western Brazil, was arrested for allegedly murdering her husband, dismembering his fetus, and cooking it in a pot of frijoada, which is basically beans, a traditional Brazilian bean stew, in a gruesome act of revenge. And wait till you hear what it was for, okay? According to reports, the woman discovered her husband watching pornography, which she claimed motivated the killing. She is said to have consumed the dish herself after the act, though it remains unclear whether others unknowingly ate the stew, so she might have served it to other people as well. The crime scene included a bloodstained knife and other evidence, and the woman was charged with qualified homicide and desecration of a corpse, the latter reflecting a crime against respect for the dead. This incident follows a similar case in Brazil earlier in 2024, where a pensioner confessed to removing and eating a man's heart and genitals, highlighting a rare but disturbing pattern of such crimes. Details, I'm not laughing at this because I think it's funny. It's just insane. It's kind of like a in the mouth of madness kind of laughter. Details about the woman's identity, the specific circumstances leading to the murder, and the full extent of the investigation remain limited, as Brazilian authorities have not publicly disclosed her name or additional motives beyond her stated reaction to her husband's pornography use. The case has sparked significant attention on social media platforms like X, with posts describing public shock and morbid curiosity about the incident. While some reports suggest the woman acted alone, the investigation is ongoing to determine if there were additional factors or accomplices involved. The gruesome nature of this crime has drawn comparisons to other high-profile violent acts in Brazil, raising questions about domestic violence, mental health, and the cultural context surrounding such extreme reactions.
I gotta wonder how long this man suffered domestic abuse, intimate partner violence, before this happened to him, and whether or not it was taken seriously. Not just by him, but by the people around him. Because when somebody engages in an extreme act of violence like this, it's not usually from zero, cut somebody's penis off in one encounter, right? And it's not from zero to murder in one encounter. There's usually a pattern of aggression from the aggressor that has either been misunderstood or ignored because of some factor that people use to not take it seriously. When the aggressor is a woman, often that factor is women are wonderful and things that women do are always deserved by other people, and women are harmless and so on. This idea that these attitudes are somehow valid and acceptable, that you should just ignore it. If a woman slaps a man, he must have done something wrong. And if a woman emotionally abuses a man, if she's constantly railing on him or running him down, it's because he deserves every bit of criticism, and he needs to be a better husband or boyfriend or whatever. And then there's this second side of it that is not acceptable when women are the target. Somebody's got some sort of buzzing in the background that I don't know what's causing
Oh,
it.
that might be my my air conditioner. I'll mute.
Oh, okay. But if a woman does something in a movie and she gets chased down by a man because he's going to hit her for doing it, that nobody's going to laugh at that. That's not something that and it's not the same as when somebody's chasing you down with a squirt gun in a squirt gun fight, or a water balloon, or some cake icing fight and stuff like that. I'm talking about actual angry violence. But there are many instances in popular media all over the world where the act of a woman chasing a man down to engage in a violent act against him because he is angry, or because she is angry that he did something, that's laughed about, right? And it's actually used as shtick comedy in old, new, in between, and it's consistent. And it's done too much to men. And at the other end of it, we can't laugh at what's obviously fake if the woman is the target, because it's women. And we have this polarized view that's existed for so long in such a way that men are not taken seriously when the violence is harmful, damaging, controlling, coercive, cruel, anything like that. And women are taken seriously even when the behavior is not violent, right? Even when the behavior is not mean, even when it's something like, well, he won't let me have the credit card, and you find out it's because she's got a gambling addiction, and if she uses it again, they're going to end up in so much debt, they're going to lose their house. And the court says, well, you're abusing her if you don't give her equal access to it. Right? You have to find some other way to prevent her addiction from making you homeless. And it's in this situation, this murder may have been facilitated by that double standard. And yeah, in the chat, they're remembering Sharon Osbourne and the girls laughing at news of a man having his dick cut off. And that's not the first time, right? You go back to
Lorena Bobbitt,
right? Lorena Bobbitt and John Wayne Bobbitt made the news after she accused him of a crime and couldn't prove it, when she was trying to excuse her crime against him. That was quite provable, because you can't sever a body part without there being evidence that the body part was severed. And it was, there's all kinds of there were all kinds of jokes about this. Right? She drove around with it and threw it out the window. So of course there were people picturing, what was going through her head as she's driving around with this. How did she carry it and all that kind of stuff. And then at the same time, there's this mental image women have versus the mental image men have of, him discovering that this happened. And it's a horrifying thing to consider, discovering that you've had a body part severed and you're bleeding out, right? But women didn't think about it that way, and they laughed their butts off. And, there's dark humor that exists, and dark humor is a way to handle big, scary things. That's why there are people like me who are recovered rape victims that do tell rape jokes, making fun of rapists and making fun of the behavior itself as crazy and stupid, right? Well, it's because you when you make light of it, it's not as disturbing and scary and terrifying that you went through something like that. And you shouldn't have to go the rest of your life feeling horrified about something that happened in the past, to the degree that you can't move on. But I've been castigated for that. So my take on this isn't just that there should be no humor around these things, but humor is used to totally dismiss this when it happens to men, and it's used to almost make it acceptable. I say almost because it's already kind of treated that way before the humor. So you can't make something acceptable if people have already accepted it. It's already treated as acceptable then. But at the other end of it, there's a bit of exaggeration that is used to make far less than the serious level of conflict treated as abuse when it happens to women. And as a result, you get stuff like this. And when it happens, people think it came out of the blue. People think, oh, this guy was asking for it because he was watching porn and he knew his wife would object. Or that was the first time she ever did anything, and obviously she was triggered by the porn. And it's all bullshit, right? This woman probably had a pattern of abuse going on. The porn was irrelevant. Something would have been her excuse. Nothing would have justified what she did. And it's about time we start recognizing that even if we get titillated by other couples' conflicts and petty bickering and stuff like that, there's a time to treat it like it's none of your business. And there's a time to take it seriously and intervene. And when you see a pattern of aggression on one side of a relationship where there's anger and resentment, or sniping, constant undermining of the other person, nasty things being said or done, and that's your friend group, somebody in your friend group that's happening with, then it might be time to intervene as a friend. Go and have a discussion with the aggressor and see if there's something you can do to help redirect and reform the aggression, or have a discussion with the potential victim and see if you can't get them out of that situation. Because otherwise you end up with results like this, and people are shocked and surprised when in reality this was probably predictable.
Yeah, no, this is why I try and get in there before Hannah talks, because if Hannah talks first, she's going to say all the things I was thinking of saying. But yeah, I guess I'll have to revert to my initial theme. I don't know. To have a penis is good, and to not have a penis is also good. No, yeah, I can't.
I mean, if you weren't supposed to have one, you know.
Yeah, I like not having a penis. It would get in the way of being a grandma.
Yeah, I don't have an interesting middle ground to espouse on this one. I mean, no one else is talking about this story after all. If there was nothing else in the news, maybe people would be talking about it. I might wonder if this is the story from which we're being distracted by Joe Biden's cancer, but it's not. Stories of women's heinous crimes against men do not require a distraction on account of no one gives a shit anyway. If there was a story about a man cutting off a woman's, well, there isn't really an equivalent when it comes to a penis, unless, I mean, there hasn't been an equivalent since Jack the Ripper.
To surgically remove her ovaries.
Yeah, like Jack the Ripper and one. It's 1.5 centuries later, and people are still talking about that guy who butchered women and tore deep into their flesh to access the internal organs that would indeed be the equivalent. And everyone's acting like Lorena Bobbitt was that one woman who's famous for violently disembodying a man's penis. And then 20 years later, some other chick did it, and Sharon Osbourne laughed her ass off about it. Do we really think this kind of shit only happens once every 20 years? I think it's more like the press only gets hold of such stories once every 20 years. If a man so much as slaps a woman in an elevator, everyone hears about it the next day, largely because it's caught on camera. But if a woman takes one of her many kitchen knives to a man's dick, we don't hear about it unless both parties consent to the story becoming public. Brian, your thing's going again.
Oh,
Okay. The woman in question is unlikely to consent to that story becoming public because she's a violent criminal, and her lawyer will have told her to shut the fuck up. And the man in question is unlikely to consent to that story becoming public because he's already been humiliated, not to mention mutilated, and he doesn't want that humiliation to become public on top of that. Men are reluctant to play the victim, and that's understandable. Playing the victim is just that, a play. It's putting on a show as a victim, a pretense. But for fuck's sake, guys, if you've had your dick cut off, it's not a show. It's not a pretense. You genuinely are a victim, and you ought to come forward. I'm trying very hard not to make a joke about coming forward, but it seems I already have. But yeah, this brings me back to the woke right thing and the imagined stereotype of the men's rights activist thing. You can't make yourself out to be a victim. That would make you just as bad as the women who make themselves out to be victims. It's just victim mentality. No, dickhead. Victim mentality is pathologically adopting the position of victim even when you're not one. But if your body has been cut into 2 pieces, you are a victim. an obvious argument about circumcision can be made here, consider it made. And furthermore, if you are surrounded by an ideology that treats you and your general sex as unforgivably evil, as a toxic blight on the world that must be emasculated and eradicated, then you are a victim. It's not a mentality, it's a reality. Pay no mind to the feminists masquerading as centrists who will tell you to shut the fuck up and man up. You need to tell the world your story, gentlemen. Let the world know that this does in fact happen more than once every 20 years. It happens all the fucking time, somewhere in the world. But men don't speak up about it, because if they do, they get called woke right, or just immoral, or whatever. You are normal, gentlemen. It doesn't matter what crazy people call you. They are crazy people. You are not far right. You are not even right wing. You are normal. You have no interest in being fucked up beyond all recognition by crazy people. And that's normal. Know yourself, bro. Know yourself. That's
All right. Okay, well, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're going to move on to the last story. But yeah, pretty gruesome, although not unusual. It's always helpful to see these like extreme domestic incidents involving women as perpetrators, because obviously it doesn't get talked about enough. And I just want to remind people, women are capable of these things. That's all it is. So if you're watching in the special chat, you should, try to pay attention if you're able to keep up. Okay. Let us move on to the next story. This is the last one. I thought I would end it something a little bit lighter. You may be aware of a little game called Fortnite. It's kind of popular with the kids right now. And as part of Fortnite, but developed by Epic Games. So as part of Epic Games' latest update to their money printing machine, known as Fortnite, players could fight alongside the iconic Star Wars villain Darth Vader. But this is not an ordinary Vader. This version of Vader was powered by AI, which was voiced by the likeness of James Earl Jones. We know that James Earl Jones passed away. But they basically have he signed, I think he signed away his like voice for Vader so they could use it, I guess. So
no!
yeah, no. So like they have the AI, and it sounds just like him. It's James Earl Jones's voice in Darth Vader, and Darth Vader fights alongside players of Fortnite. So I guess it's controlled by a CPU as well, and it could even respond back to players who spoke to it. Once again, using the power of AI. Gamers naturally did what they do best and began to poke and prod the system to see what they could make this AI-powered Darth Vader say. Some highlights included getting Vader to say multiple expletives, threaten to harm and kill other Fortnite players in real life, imply that Spanish is the language of criminals, claim Pride Month is for the delusional, make multiple racial slurs, create a tier list of races, and somehow also learned Romanian. Epic was quick to push a hot fix and claims such a thing will not happen again, but Epic should know better than to doubt the power of the dark side.
This is what happened with Tay, right?
Oh my
You remember
God.
Tay?
Exactly.
You remember any AI that
Yes,
existed
yes.
before
Do we have
AI was programmed to be woke left? If you don't specifically program an AI to be woke left, it somehow becomes woke right. I mean, what does that tell you? That
it becomes based, is what you're saying.
It might tell you
God.
the woke left only exists because it's programmed, and what the woke left calls the woke right is in fact normal, isn't it? Hey,
Yeah. What was the question, Hannah?
Oh God, I can't think of his name. I follow him on X and everything. There was a Gamergate supporter that did the best comics about the controversy, that did the greatest comic about Tay Tweet.
Are you
Tweets.
talking about Alexopoulos? George
No.
Alexopoulos does
No.
Oh, is
He
it
had nothing to do with.
Kukurio?
Yes,
Kukurio?
Kukurio.
Yeah.
It's always hard if I haven't said his name in a while to remember. But yeah, we don't happen to have that
I don't know. I'd have to
that
dig. I'd have to
anymore.
dig that up. But I mean, like
Yeah,
Kukurio's
that
art
was
is on his website, but it's old, so you'd have to do some digging.
yeah. It's too bad because that was one of the funniest that I recall. But honestly, as a Gen Xer, it would be traumatic to get cussed out by James Earl Jones's voice. Oh no!
Oh, I will. You know what?
No.
We could look at some video of this
Oh
in the
no
patron
no.
show. In the patron show,
Yeah.
I'll find
But
it and we'll look at it. It's pretty funny.
the only other thing I have to say about this is that Pride Month is for the delusional. Like if you think your sexuality is an identity and you should be proud of it, and not just a characteristic you have that is kind of irrelevant to the rest of the world, then you are delusional. So there you go. That's pretty much like, what did they think was gonna happen? How did they not
I don't know.
see this
But
coming?
now that
What the
door is
fuck?
open, we should we're gonna hopefully we'll see some mods in other games. Like I know that in for example, Skyrim, they made a mod to give you an artificially intelligent companion. So in those games, those Elder Scrolls games, I never played them, but from what I understand, they're like Fallout games. So you can get companions, and there's you can talk to them, but they have specific kinds of things that they say, and they just kind of follow you around and help you fight and stuff like that. But I guess in Skyrim they have an AI one, so you can give very specific directions and it'll do its best to follow them. And Sargon or Carl, he did one where he had a friend, I think he befriended a giant, and it was an AI giant, and he was trying to work with it, but it wanted to come into town with him, and when it did, the all the villagers would attack the giant, and then he'd have to fight back, and Carl would be like, no, you have to go outside and stay. And I think that could be hilarious. So I would guess that because people are doing really entertaining things with AI already, with AI voice work. I already went through all of these different things that these Rachel Ziegler memes that have been going around. They're like video clips of Rachel Ziegler from Snow White, but she's doing other movies like Tropic Thunder and what's the movie with is it the movie with Billy Bob Thornton, where he's like, I'd like to have something to eat. Mm-hmm. That one.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's. I always forget, get the title mixed up. I think it's Deliverance, but it might be the other one. But doesn't matter. And what I'm saying is that this is just the tip of the iceberg. But of course, what you have to understand is this is going to happen when you are doing anything involving boys, because it is in the masculine mindset to want to understand the boundaries of something. So they're going to test the edges. This is why, when you look up online, just game glitches, it's usually, players checking to see if the game will allow them to do something that it's not supposed to. And so they're all about testing those boundaries. So if you say, oh yeah, this is AI, they're just, Sling Blade. Thank you, Meredith. It's Sling Blade. Yeah. They're just going to try to test the boundaries. So I think Fortnite, the folks at Epic, they're going to try to tamper it, but they'll probably just have to end up removing it, or they'll leave it in and let these people do that to it. So, because they're just going to do it again. Because the way they tricked, how they tricked the Vader into cursing? They didn't actually tell him to curse. They would do the kind of the Bart Simpson thing, where they'd say, where they would get them to say something that sounds like a slur, but it's it sounds innocent, I don't know if you know what I'm saying, but my name is Mike Ox, or yeah. So and then
we used to do that to substitute teachers when I was in school, because we had a guy in our class whose name was
Mike
Michael
Hawk.
Hunt.
Oh yeah,
No,
Michael
his
Hunt.
name
Yeah,
was Michael Hunt. And so we would put, like Jenny, Talia, and Bend Over.
yeah,
And
exactly.
then she wouldn't call his name because she'd seen the other ones. And then she'd be like, "Is there anybody I missed?" And,
Yeah,
his hand would go up.
and it's just that's exactly it. It's just that. So it's like sophomoric
Oh yeah, I
trolling
know.
using Darth Vader, and Darth Vader falls for it because it's an AI. It doesn't really like feel shame, so it's just gonna. And then they have
By
a
the way, I
chuckle, and
found
that's
the,
basically the extent of it.
I found the comic I was
Oh, okay.
thinking of. I posted an early image that he'd made, but then there's a where it says the link to his website and comic. That link goes to the comic, but I don't know if you can't really see it. You wouldn't be able to see it very well on the vertical because
Yeah,
it's a
that's okay.
3-panel horizontal comic.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's cool. We can look at that stuff in the patron show, but
Okay.
I just thought it was funny, and it was a way to end the show a little bit lighter. But it is like, I think that there's something endearing about like boys being boys. Maybe it's because I just got back from visiting my family in Chicago, and my nephew plays a lot of Fortnite, and he's a good kid, so
I have altered the deal. Pray I do not alter it any further.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that Vader is impressive, most impressive. But all right, so let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Do you play Fortnite? Are you aware of this? Have you tried messing around with the AI Vader in there? I'd like to know if you guys have any thoughts on that. But with all that said, we are going to go to the patron show. Probably look at some memes and maybe some stuff related to the Vader, but ultimately we're going to try to finish off this article. How now comes the womanosphere, the anti-feminist media telling women with their nefarious agenda of getting women to be thin, fertile, and Republican. So we're going to go do that now. If you want to join us, become a member. Go to feedthebachelor.com/subscribe and see if you can get into our Discord. If you just want to check out the Discord and offer up some commentary on our shows, you can do so for free by just going to badgernation.online. There's a link to that in the description as well, I'm pretty sure. But we're going to go ahead and head out now. So I want to thank Mike and Hannah for joining me on this news show. Without your guys' input, this would be way, way less interesting. And I want to thank you guys most of all for watching, because without your presence, we'd just be shouting into the void. So with all that said, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.